Hey, what's up, guys? We're going to talk about Docker Compose today. Be sure to check out the link in the description to go check out the GitHub to follow along. I'm going to start out by making two directories here. We're going to call one app1 and the second one app2. Basically, what we're going to do here is we're going to make two little node servers to run in their own containers, and we're going to spin both of those up and manage them using a Docker Compose YAML file. So let's go ahead and make our Docker Compose file. Now in this video you're going to see me yarn add body parser and express and nodemon from here. Then later I go back and correct it and yarn add those dependencies inside of app1 and app2 directories. Here we go, adding those packages, and again these are going to be inside app1 and app2, not here. I'm going to move that in just a minute. And let's make a git ignore so that we do not upload node modules to GitHub. And again, this is going to be app1/node modules and app2/node modules, not node modules there. Okay, cool. So inside these directories we don't have anything here, so we're going to need an index file for our node server, and then we're also going to need a Docker file. And for simplicity's sake, I'm just going to copy and paste things over from one app to the other one just for the tutorial. Okay, cool. Now let's go over here and start writing a simple node server here. I'm going to be using Express. Basically, we're just going to build a really simple node server using Express and just one simple status route. Skip ahead a little bit here. So basically, we're going to be running on port 4000 by default unless we override it by an environment variable. So let's go and take a look at our Docker file. It's going to be creating an image to house our node server. So we're going to be using node boron as our base image. Basically, this is like a node, exact node and yarn already installed on it. You're going to kind of get the latest without giving a actual version number on it. So give it a nice little description here. An example microservice. Sounds good. Okay, now I want to go ahead and make a directory here for where all our code is going to be going inside the container. That's existing inside the Docker container, not the host. So we'll call it app, and then we're going to say app is going to be our working directory. So all our commands that we're going to say from there on out from the Docker file are going to be run from inside /app in that container. So now we want to expose. This is the command we're going to use to expose what port this is going to be running on, and this one is going to be on 4000. We'll just go ahead and just expose that, hard code it in there because that's what we default to there, just for the sake of this demo. Alright, now we're going to give it CMD, short for command. That's just going to be the default startup command that the container is going to use if you don't specify anything to override it with. Now this add command I'm going to go back and change in just a minute later. Right now I'm going to write it as if I'm running the Docker file from the root of this directory, which is totally possible, but I'm going to go back and change it again as if it's being run inside of app1 and the other one's being run inside of app2. So we need to add the index.js file inside of the app directory in the container. Now we need to think about what we need once we have the index file inside the container. We need to be able to run yarn to get our dependencies, which means that we also need our package.json and our yarn log files. You can actually add all that on the same line. If you're adding individual files, all you need to do is just separate them by spaces, and the target directory just needs to have a slash after it. Okay, that looks pretty good. I'm just going to move some things around just a little bit. I typically like to add files into the directory before I declare the work directory. Totally preference. Okay, and just for the sake of the demo, I'm just going to copy the same Docker file over to app2. Okay, now this is a totally separate application, different microservice, different Docker container, image, and everything. We can change whatever we want to here, but just for the sake of the demo, I'm just going to change a couple things. Keep it pretty much the same. We need to add our files from the app2 directory, not the app1, so we'll just change that over. We can still call the directory app because it's a totally different container. Still run yarn, everything. Now we're running on a different port, running on 8080 because that's the one we described, or that's the one we defaulted to in our index file. Okay, that looks all pretty good. Command is still the same. We're still going to spin up a node server called index.js. Running out of app, okay. Now I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing for the index files for the node servers in each application. I'm just going to copy this one over from app2 over to app1 just for the sake of the demo. I'm just going to change a couple of things here. The main thing is we want to run on a different port, obviously, and we can't override this. Say if we had the exact same server as the other one, we could just override with an environment port, or excuse me, with a port environment variable. Well, I'm just going to go ahead and hard code this one to default to 4000. And we're not going to use the environment variable ports to override them for this demo. Okay, now let's go ahead and take a look at our Docker Compose file. I'm using version 3. The first step is to define what we call services. Basically, each service is going to have a container, but note that a service is not a container. That's important to understand. So alpha is the name of the first service I'm defining here. You can call it whatever you want to, hello world, my service, or whatever. So basically, how you define how it builds the image. There's several different ways you can do. One way I'm showing you here is you can specify an actual Docker file called whatever. It could actually be called test.docker file if you want. You can use the Docker file extension, or you can specify just context, which just means to go search for a Docker file in the given directory. Now note I came back and changed this add command. I'm actually adding index.js as if Docker file is being run from app1 directory as opposed to the root of the directory. So let's go ahead and use the context command here. Note that if we did the other way, we would say context from the root directory and specify the Docker file. But since I made that change to the Docker file to be run inside of app1, we're going to specify context. Okay, now let's start adding our environment variables. We're going to give it the version description. Just give it a nice little indicator to say which service we have. And then the node environment. And let's just, for the sake of the demo, say this one is production. And we're going to give the other one development. And we'll say we have to map the ports out. We have the host port and then the container port. And then let's define our next service. We'll call it beta. I'll tell it how to build it. Again, give it the context. And start defining our environment variables. Again, we got a version description that's just going to indicate which service it is whenever we check the status routes. Now we're just giving random strings to identify each version of our servers, but it might be a little more relevant If we said blue-green, say if we're doing a blue-green deployment. Now, green could be in a different node environment than blue at any time. It could be staging, or let's just go ahead and say development so that we can see how to make changes to one running container. Let's give it our ports. Let's map this one to the ones it's running on. Remember, this one's on 8080 on the local host, and then 8080 on the container. And now let's go ahead and define a volume. Because we're in development mode, we want to be able to make changes. We have to give this container access to this directory, which has this file in it. Now the host is always relative to the root directory, so we're going to say /app2. It's going to point to our source code. Now syntax is you give it a colon and then you say an absolute path of where it is in the container. In our case, it's just /app. Now what we also want to do is we want to override the command that we've defined in our Docker file, which here is just node index.js. Want to inject our own predefined yarn dev, which I've installed nodemon as a dev startup command just to restart the file every time the index has changed. Now Docker Compose up will bring up whatever you built last and build whatever it can't find. If you give it the --build argument, it'll force everything to rebuild. You notice I typed that wrong. It's Docker-compose up and Docker-compose down. And you see that Docker Compose is building 2 individual images for us and spinning up containers for each service. Now it's actually putting each container on a network for you under the hood. So each container is actually accessible to the other one. Okay, and now you see we have Alpha 1 running on 4000, and we have Beta 1 running on 8080. And you see that Beta has the nodemon command started up. So we see 8080 status, we're in development mode, and 4000 we're in production, blue. Cool. Okay, now let's say we want to make some changes to app2 since it's in development mode. Let's just go ahead and just anything I change here, I'll just make a comment just to show you the files changed, and you see nodemon down there at the bottom telling you it's restarting due to changes, and it's back up again due to the yarn dev. And again, that can only be possible because you have the mapped volume. If you tried to change files on this index, it's not going to restart because there's no volumes defined, and we're actually not even using nodemon in the production container. Now, another cool thing that Docker Compose does for you is it gracefully shuts down your containers the first time you hit Control-C out of that, or if you have it running in the background. Now, say I only want to run a command on just one of my services. I can say Docker-compose up and just target the actual service name. Got to give the actual --build argument before the target name, and say alpha there, and this will force a rebuild of my alpha service and cause it to start running. And of course bring it back up with a running container. And there you go, it's running again on 4000. Cool, thanks for watching, guys. Hope this has been a little bit of an easy mode intro into Docker Compose for all you just getting into Docker out there. Be sure to check out my GitHub and let me know what you think. Thanks.